government, through the National Treasury, has been on a mission to consolidate the country's fiscal position for years. Simply put, it's been looking to narrow the gap between what it receives in tax revenue and what it spends. For far too long now, it's been spending much more than it actually receives in taxes. This has resulted in the National Treasury having to go out to the bond markets to borrow money to fill the gap. And because the country's credit rating has been at junk status for over a decade, the interest rates that we pay for those loans are substantial.
Since 2020, when the COVID pandemic hit us, expenditure has been dramatically curtailed, and the growth rate of expenditure since that period has been brought to a historically low rate of expenditure growth. So since 2012, we've had constrained expenditure. Since 2020 and the COVID pandemic, this constraint has been intensified quite dramatically. And now we find ourselves seeing an MTBPS, which proposes to significantly intensify austerity measures in the current year and over the medium term.
Civil society groups say the years of cutting expenditure have been laid bare in the state of the country and the lack of basic services available. But also the issue of a capable state was raised, with that seen diminishing with each passing year.
Joburg, you see it in Cape Town, where there used to be a bus route, there's no longer a bus route. And we don't have these conversations. We don't talk about the erosion of the welfare state, essentially, because that's what we're talking about. You know, we want to talk about a caring state, a caring economy. And so some of the work I've been doing with a colleague of mine, Lisa Vetten, is that this is essentially, we want to argue, is an uncaring state. The medium-term budget policy statement was an uncaring policy statement because it leaves people further behind, despite the gains.
Civil society continues to advocate for the Social Relief of Distress grant introduced during the COVID era to ultimately become a basic income grant in line with the poverty line figure, which is significantly more than 350 rand, but expressed frustration at the government's lack of understanding around the kind of impacts this could have.
The knee-jerk reaction is fiscal prudence. We don't want to growth is not large enough to guarantee that we know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So we should keep our expenditure and not allocate it. So there is a deafness to the questions of what are poor people meant to do about not having food today, but also on the potential economic growth that could come from mass distribution at grassroots of food, of money into poor economies.
Meanwhile, some experts predict that even more austere budgets being announced will result in the shrinking of personnel in key services in the economy, like education, health and crime fighting. They argue that the fiscal consolidation drive runs the risk of actually threatening economic growth further, not making space for it.
So it kind of rebounds on itself in a cycle. And the fundamental cause of this problem is slow growth. If fiscal consolidation were implemented in a context where there was rising confidence, if the consolidation measures on the table created a sense of rising confidence amongst private investors that consolidation would resolve the problem, that could lead to an easing of interest rates that the government faces, and that would offset the impact of consolidation on economic growth.
But therein lies the problem. Business confidence continues to falter due to a myriad of factors. Load shedding and logistical constraints are a couple. Then there's service delivery at the municipal level, the higher cost of doing business and much more. The argument is that the government can consolidate all it likes, but until the economic environment is conducive for business to have the necessary confidence, serious economic growth, which will be the main lever for changing the country's fortunes, won't be realized. Nompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.